I am recording. You like that? No, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. We're gonna do it again. Myself, I'm psyching myself up. Don't pay no attention to her. Hey guys, it's Ernesto. Welcome back to another Monday critique video. I hope you're having a fantastic Monday. I'm having a wonderful Monday. I want to thank you guys for your wonderful support. I want to thank you guys for supporting Ben and Anthony for the Monday Critique Takeover. They did a fantastic job. And now I'm ready to jump back into it. I'm gonna get into the Dubai trip on another video, and I'm gonna get into the photo shoot that I did over there on another video. But this particular video is not about that, and this particular video is about two fantastic artists who submitted their photos to be critiqued, and we will critique those photos right after this intro. If you guys want to submit your image to be critiqued, please join our Facebook group. It's called Fine Art Photography and Modeling. In that group, I created a specific thread where you could submit your images to be critiqued. Hey guys, welcome back. We are about to jump straight into this critique. We are going to critique this gentleman's photo. Thank you very much for submitting your photo, Palani. Palani is a local photographer here in Raleigh. I know him pretty well. Thank you very much for submitting your photo, Palani. Now let's just jump straight into it. All right, so now let's start out with light. Light is very important. I always say light is very important in most of these videos that I do, but it's very important. So with respect to the light in this image, Palani did a pretty good job of trying to balance artificial light with ambient light. Now, I talk about balancing artificial light with ambient light in multiple videos before, so go back and check those videos previously, and even check out some of the photo shoots that I've done using ambient light and artificial light to try to blend those two together. So that seems to be the goal in this particular image. And it also seems like Palani found a nice shaded area to put these subjects in, which, you know, when you're working with trees and light, sometimes you have like a little spots of light that may hit the subjects that's not that flattering. So he found a nice pocket of shaded area to put the subjects in, which is awesome. Now, the execution of trying to balance the artificial light with the ambient light, I think is where the plan fell apart a little bit. So if you notice, Palani included, fortunately for us with respect to the critiquing of the light, fortunately for us, he included the light source. Unfortunate with respect to the composition, which I'll get into, but with respect to the light source is included. Now, if you look at the light source, you will notice that the light source is pointing towards the midsection and not necessarily the subject's face. Now, the thing that comes to mind immediately when I look at this image and that light source is that perhaps Palani had maybe a grid on that light source, which is why it was so concentrated and hidden just the midsection perhaps. And even if it wasn't gridded and the light source was just so small and it was hidden that midsection, the one thing I would say when working with artificial light, and you know that your artificial light source is so narrow, whether it's gridded or not, if you know it's narrow in nature, maybe it was zoomed into 200 or something, maybe it was using a speed light. That's what it looks like in this image, maybe a speed light he was using. And that speed light, as far as the zoom, it was zoomed into like 200 and it had the light concentrated in such a fashion. My suggestion is make sure that you go home and you practice with your light sources. Figure out the distance between your subject and your light source to figure out how much power that would need to push out in order to expose your subject properly. That's the first thing. to understand distance between subject and light source, because when you're working with your clients, you want to make sure that if you're going to bring out an artificial light source, that as soon as you turn that light source on, you want to be able to say, okay, I'm going to need X number of power, half a power, full power, just to get this shot working with these subjects with the distance that you're working on. You want to be able to know your flashes, your strobes. You want to be able to know what kind of power is going to output before you even take it out. You want to know why you're going to take it out, you know? So understanding those things, go home, play with it, figure out what settings you need to have it at in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve. That's the first thing. The second thing is you also want to figure out the spread, the light spread on your light source, right? So if your light source is very narrow, then when you go out and you take in a photo of someone, and if you know your light source is narrow, you know that you're gonna have to basically dial in that light source very precisely to hit the area that you want it to hit, right? So if you wanted to hit the face, it will hit the face. Make sure that you have it dialed in to hit the face. If you don't want it to hit the wall, maybe that would be a great light source for that, because the light source is so narrow, it wouldn't have much of a spread and wouldn't hit the wall. Understanding the power, understanding the light spread, just understanding those basic things about your artificial light when working with it will help you tremendously when you're in the field. So now let's just wrap up really quick here with respect to the lighting and this image. Fundamentals are very important. Getting that down is one of the number one things that you want to do, okay? When working with artificial light, some people feel like it's very overwhelming and it's very hard or whatever. It's really not, but it can be if you don't understand the fundamentals and you're under pressure to get things done. So understanding the fundamentals is very important. And once you understand the fundamentals, you can execute quicker and more efficiently, you know? So just basically try to understand those fundamentals, practice at home with the artificial light, and that will help you tremendously with any photo shoot and working with, you know, even with 1 or 500. I don't think you're gonna use 500, but you know, you get the idea. If you're working with 1 artificial light, 2 artificial lights, 3, 4, 5, whatever the number is, as long as you understand the basic fundamentals of artificial light, how it works, the spread of those lights, the power that they output. Once you understand those things, you can work with any light source and you'll be able to manipulate it at will. So I would say practice, you know, more with the light, and definitely don't practice on a client. Practice with a model, practice on your own, practice on your kids, practice on yourself, but don't practice on clients, because that's very important. But overall, great job. Let's move on. So now let's move on to the posing with these 2 subjects. Now let's talk about what Polanyi was trying to do with respect to these 2 subjects. What I believe what he was trying to do here was create an intimate moment between these 2 couples, which I think might be a bride. I don't know if it's a wedding or if it was an engagement session. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't really matter. We have a couple and they appear to be husband and wife, fiancés, I don't know, boyfriend and girlfriend. It could be either or. But what we are trying to do here, or what he is trying to do here, is create an intimate moment between these 2 subjects. Now, there's a couple of things that we could do to improve this connection between these 2 subjects, right? Now, the one thing that people struggle with when working with more than 1 subjects, posing more than 1 subjects, it tends to become a little bit overwhelming, right? Now, the way I approach it is I approach every subject the same way I would approach a single subject. So if I have to pose 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, it doesn't really matter. I always start out with the 1 person first, meaning I pose that 1 person initially. Once I pose that first person, then I would introduce the second person and I will pose that person as well. And then once I get those two people properly posed together, then I would work on the expression. One of the things that you could do is ask the couple to embrace each other, okay? Because they're in love with each other, right? So, you know, they embrace each other, they're having that nice intimate moment. The expression might be there, you know, because they love each other. So as far as they're looking at each other and, you know, having that moment between themselves, that might be a powerful moment to capture on camera, right? But if you're trying to get like a nice pose, that embrace may not necessarily be the best, right? So what I believe you did here is you basically asked the couple to just simply embrace each other. And the problem with that is that you end up with some of this awkward positioning of hands, legs, and stuff like that. So here's the couple of things that I noticed with this embrace. So now let's just start with the arm. And the reason I'm starting with the arm is because that's pretty much one of the areas that is the brightest area in this image. And that goes back to the lighting that we talked about earlier. Now, just focusing on the arm. Going back to a previous Monday critique video that I did, it talked about if you could bend a joint on the human form, bend it. That is the case in this image. You want to make sure when you have an elbow, especially when dealing with females, right? And especially if the situation calls for it, okay? Now, in this particular image and in this particular moment between these two subjects, it definitely calls for it. Because what's happening with this arm is drawing a lot of attention, okay? And the reason it's drawing a lot of attention is because it's just locked into position, and that's all I see when I look at this image, is that arm just locked in. So what I would suggest is just bending her elbow just a little bit would help with this shot. So right now our arm is like this. If you had bent it just a little bit, that would help add just a little bit of elegance to this shot. Also, following the arm, going down to the wrist, you will notice that her wrist is also straight. By having her bend her wrist just a little bit as she's holding that dress, it would also enhance the shot just a little bit. So that's just the arm. I mean, it's not a big change, but it does help a great deal, okay? Although it's a very little change, it does help with the shot. Now, let's talk about her leg positioning. Although you cannot see her legs, right? It doesn't mean that her legs don't have to be posed. The legs still have to be posed, even though you can't see the legs under the dress. Here's why. If the legs are posed properly, then it would add shape to her form that would give it that hourglass shape or that S-curve shape that you would be expecting to see in a female form. Right now, because her legs are not properly posed, all you see is just like a straight line, and that's not what you expect to see in a female form. So you want to be able to add that S-curve into the shot by posing her legs properly. So that would be the other thing that I would suggest with respect to this pose. The other thing is, if we look at her right arm, which is on camera left, the right arm right now is just hanging. It's not really doing much. So my suggestion here would be to have her just bring her right arm up and just put it on his hands, right? So that would show a form of connection between those two subjects. Right now, there is really no connection. She's not holding his hands at all. either with her left or right arm. She's not holding his hands at all. So it just feels like a total disconnect, like, you know, she was just paired up with this person and there's really no relationship there. So that's what I would suggest with her hand position, her right arm position, to just help with that connection. That's respect to the female, right? So if you notice, I am posing just the female subject right now. I'm not even posing the guy. I'm just posing the female subject. So when you're working with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 couples, or I shouldn't say couples, but when you're working with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 individuals, and you have to pose them all as a group or a couple, you always start out with one, and then you move on to the next, which is what we're gonna do now with respect to the male subject. So, with respect to the male subject, where he is totally fine. I like where he is, that is great. A couple of things that I would like to change in this image to help bring that connection, because that's basically what we are trying to do. We're trying to show a connection between these two subjects. I think that was the word that I'm trying to struggle with from the beginning, but that's it. That's the theme here, to try to show some type of connection between these two. So in order to help with that, right? So now I'm posing the male, right? Female, as far as the posing is concerned, if you had made those adjustments, she would have been set. There's nothing else to be done. Now it's just about posing the male subject in this image to help with that connection, okay? So the first thing I would do with the male subject is I would just have him bring his head in to her temple, right? So basically his forehead into her temple, he will be looking into her. So another thing that I noticed with respect to this shot is that there are like too many hands in this shot. It's like a little bit distracting for me. And the thing that I'm thinking about to do to help enhance the shot just a little bit more is to position his hands maybe on her wrist, his left hand on her left wrist. And I think that would help with the amount of hands that I see in this shot, which is just a little bit distracting to me, okay? Maybe it's not to you, but it's just a little bit distracting to me, and that's what I would do to help enhance this shot just a little bit more. So those simple adjustments, I think, will help enhance this shot and add that connection that I think that's missing from this shot. So after you pose the subjects and you have everything posed properly, the one thing that you need to add to the pose to help give it life is you need to add a bit of an expression that brings life into the shot. So either having the subjects laugh, smiling, you just have to add that sense of emotion, that sense of connection to the pose, or else the pose just becomes stiff. It'll be fine, but it now becomes a little bit stiff. So you have to add that emotion to it, that expression to the shot, okay? So those are the things that I would say to help enhance the pose in this shot. Now, I hope that was helpful. So thank you very much. So now let's talk about the composition in this image. So from a compositional perspective, the things that I want to talk about is when you're working with an image or creating an image, right? You're always working with 4 corners, right? 4 corners of your image. Now, what you include or exclude in that image could make or break your image, okay? Sometimes people include things intentionally in their photos, like light fixtures or light sources or whatever the case may be, because they know that they're gonna take it out in post, or because they know it's a composite and they know they can exclude it in post. So if it's intentional, you know that it's gonna be removed in post, then it's totally fine. But if you know you don't have any intention of removing it in post, you wanna make sure that you exclude it in your composition. Now, the reason I think that you may have forgotten or not noticed this light source is because when you submitted it, in the image, the light source is there. If this was the final image, then I would have thought that, you know, from a post-production perspective, you would have removed that light source, so that light source is not in your final image. So maybe you didn't notice it, I don't know. Let me know below, put a comment down below, let me know if you noticed it or not noticed it, and you just probably forgot to take it out in post. But I love to know the reasoning behind that. Now, that's one thing, okay, about the light source. The other thing is, when I look at the subjects, now the subjects is being, especially the female subject, is being hidden behind a rock a little bit. So I would suggest either moving your camera position that's not hiding them, or basically change your composition by either not getting a full-length shot, or maybe just getting a shot from, you know, from the waist up. But if that's not at all possible, meaning moving your camera position or getting not a full-length shot but a shot from the waist up, if those things are not possible, my suggestion is just ask the couple to move over to the right, camera right, just a little bit, so that they're not hidden behind that rock the way they are. And I think that would help, you know, add a little bit more of interest to the shot. Maybe you'll be able to see the young lady's heels, her shoes, you may be able to see that in the shot. So, you know, those are a couple of things I would say from a compositional perspective that you will want to change to help enhance this shot just a little bit more. The final thing that I wanted to talk about with respect to the composition in this image is, I believe there's a birdhouse behind the subjects, and I think that's a little bit distracting. So my suggestion would be to remove the birdhouse either in post, or use the subjects to help hide that bird cage so that it's not in the shot at all, because you don't want people to be looking at the bird cage. There's no interest there. You want them to be looking at the couple, right? So my suggestion is either remove it in post, or if you didn't want to remove it in post and you just want to save yourself the headache, use the couple to help hide it, or change your composition altogether by excluding it from the shot altogether. So going back to just getting a close-up of them as opposed to a full length shot. So those are the things I would suggest to help enhance this composition just a little bit more. So now let's talk about post-production. Now, I mentioned a couple of these things already when I was talking about composition and when I was talking about lighting, right? So these things can be fixed very easily in post. So the light that you included in the shot could easily be removed in post-production. The birdhouse could easily be removed in post-production. So I would say, if you didn't submit this image yet to your clients, I don't know, maybe you did or did not. If you didn't, I would say go and remove those two things like immediately. Those are things that could be easily fixed. So I would say if you haven't done it, like do it now, right? And that would help enhance this shot a lot more. The other thing I would do in this shot is, if you notice on the lower portion of the image where the young lady's dress is, you will notice that there's a piece of leaf or flower or something that's at the lower portion of her dress. My suggestion is to remove that completely, because that's not offering anything to the shot. Just remove it, get rid of it in post, and that would help with the shot greatly. The other thing is with respect to the light. Now, I never would use post-production to help save my image where I mess up with respect to the light. But in this particular case, I would say try to see if you could reduce the exposure just a little bit on her arm and her dress in post, and that would help eliminate the distraction, if you would, that's forcing the viewer to look in that area. And then I would enhance the exposure on the subject's face to help draw the viewer's attention to their face just a little bit more. With those little tweaks, I think that would help make this image a lot stronger. So another thing that you could do with respect to this image is add a little bit of color work to it. Now, that's what I do to my image. That's what most people do to their images. So that would be my suggestion there. Just add a little bit more color work to it. Color work is always subjective. Don't go too crazy with it. Make sure that it enhances the image. You don't want it to be distracting. You want it to enhance the image. So that's the only thing I would suggest there with respect to this image. But overall, I like what I'm seeing here. So great job. Now, moving on to image number 2. Now, this image was submitted by this gentleman. Thank you very much, Rich, for submitting your image. I sincerely appreciate it. Now let's dive into your image. So from a lighting perspective, Richard used window light in this particular image, which is awesome. Most people use it. I use it. It comes in very handy on a wedding day, especially with those getting ready shots. So use of a window light is always awesome. So the light in this image is very, very soft. I love it. On the subject, what we have here is a split lighting situation. The left side of the subject's face is mostly in shadow, and the right side of the subject face is lit, okay? So what you have here is a split lighting situation. My suggestion to help eliminate that split lighting situation would be to have the subject just turn her face just a little bit more into that light source, and that would have helped with the split lighting situation. It would add a little bit of light on the left side of her face, giving her somewhat of a Rembrandt lighting. So that's what I would suggest here. I mean, other than that, there is really nothing else I could say with respect to this light. Nice catch lights in the eyes, nice hair light. You know, all the other stuff on this with respect to the lighting, I love. So I wouldn't suggest anything else to enhance, but that was the only thing that I noticed that would help enhance this image just a little bit more, which is to eliminate that catch light. I mean, eliminate catch light? No, we don't want to eliminate catch light, which is to eliminate that split lighting situation, okay? That would be my only suggestion. So now let's move on to the posing in this image. Not that there's much posing going on with respect to this image, because all we're dealing with is a head, but I think the positioning of the head would help significantly. And right now our head is tilting towards camera. I think if our head would be tilting away from camera and turning a little bit more towards the window, not only would it help with the lighting that we talked about earlier, but it also would help make the shot a little bit better with respect to the positioning of her head. And I think a little bit of that Tyra Banks smizing, that's what it is. That Tyra Banks smizing would help with this shot a little bit, and just a little bit of parting of the lips would help with this shot as well. That would help bring out more of the expression in this subject. So right now it seems to be a little bit more stiff. There's not much expression from the subject, and given that the focus is on the face, I would think you would want a little bit more expression coming out of the subject. I'm not saying that the subject has to be like, you know, laughing or smiling or, you know, whatever. It just have to give some sort of type of expression back to the viewer to give them a sense of what they should feel, right? Happy, sad, mad, or neutral, right? Right now there's just like, you know, it's just like flat line, if you would, when you're looking at the subject. You're not really getting much out of her. That's the only thing that I notice when I'm looking at the subject. I guess posing for me is two parts, right? You pose the subject, you get, you know, all their joints properly positioned, the head positioned properly, all that good stuff. But then the other part of it is, you know, the expression, the feeling, you know, pulling that kind of stuff out of the subject, because once you have a pose could be very stiff if there's no expression. So you must have some sort of expression with the pose. So that's the thing that I would suggest with respect to the pose in this image. I hope that was helpful. So now let's move on to the composition in this image. From a compositional perspective, I think the composition is pretty awesome. The only thing that's a little bit distracting to me is if you look at the back of her head, there's a pole or something that's behind her head. And I think either removing that in post or coming in with a tighter crop would eliminate that little distraction behind her head. And that's it. That's the only thing that I noticed in this image. Overall, like I said, I think the expression is pretty, I think the composition is pretty awesome. So great job with that. Now let's get into the rating of these two images. The first image on deck is Polani's. Light. I gave this image a 3. Pose. I gave this image a 2. Composition. I gave this image a 3. Post-production. I gave this image a 2. Overall, this image received a rating of 2.5. Now let's get into the rating of Richard's image. Light. I gave this image a 3. Pose. I gave this image a 2. Composition. I gave this image a 4. Overall, this image received a rating of 3 out of 5. Thank you very much for submitting your images. I sincerely hope you guys got a lot of information from it. And I certainly hope the viewers also got some information from it as well. I'm still a little bit jet lagged from my trip, but I'm trying to get back into it. This is the first day I'm back since my trip, so I'm trying to get back into the Eastern time zone. So Anthony Ben, thank you very much for stepping in and assisting while I was away. I sincerely appreciate it. And I will be looking out for you guys again at some point in the future to come and assist on another takeover. I don't know when, but at some point I'm gonna reach out and tap on your shoulders and ask if you are willing to step in once again. So again, thank you. That is it. Thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with your friends and family. And please put some feedback down below and let me know what you think about this video. And guys, if you got this far in the video, you must be enjoying this content and you must be enjoying this channel. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next Monday.